Thank you, Tom, for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues at the table, and all participants in the room. Let me begin this intervention by thanking the Geneva Support Group for Western Sahara for organizing this event and for including the voices of international civil society, such as the Moundou Foundation, which I represent. It is always a challenge for international civil society to reach these forums, especially in these times of shrinking civic space where our voices are silenced, persecuted, and criminalized. Those who denounce the collusion between economic interest and political power as usually the most invisible and marginalized. A good example of this, Antona was saying, is the persecution of Sahrawi activists who denounce economic neocolonialism, one of whose paradigmatic practices is greenwashing. I would like to dedicate my first words to acknowledging the indispensable role of the research and testimony of Sahrawi activists in a territory closed to independent international monitoring. They are paying a heavy price for the commitment for human rights. Our respect, admiration, and solidarity go to all of them. Over the last 5 years, the Moundou Foundation has sought precisely to contribute to the work of these local activists by developing in-depth research on the practices of neocolonial extractivism that sustain the legal Moroccan occupation and that are behind the stagnation of the decolonization process in Western Sahara. We've carried out several studies, each of them focusing on a different and complementary aspect of the economic architecture of the occupation and its consequences in terms of human rights violation for the Sahrawi people. These studies were developed on the basis of the principle of permanent sovereignty of the natural resources, as Manuel was explaining, so I wouldn't go in detail into that. The first report that we published in 22 revealed the essential role of the primary sector. Silvia was pointing out this question, the role of the primary sector in the strategy of occupation of the territory. This report showed how tomato production in Dakhla region under the umbrella of the so-called Green Morocco plan is in fact a system based of agro-industrial model that benefits only a small number of companies linked to the Morocco royal family and French business groups. This model in turn has serious repercussions on the local social fabric and workers' rights, of course, and as well on the territory water resources due to the over-exploitation that is carried out without the necessary environmental impact assessment, as Silvia was pointing out. As it is often the case, this study has raised a number of questions relating to the lack of information in the various areas covered by the research, including the role of the European Union and the responsibility of the European companies in the economic architecture of the occupation. In 2021, we published a new study that sought to shed light to this issue. The report, European Companies and Human Rights Violations in Western Sahara, shows how 5 European companies from the renewable energy sector stand out among the most important companies with a permanent presence in the occupied territory of Western Sahara. It also shows how these same companies and the renewable energy technologies that they are developing in Western Sahara are being financed by European funds. In order to further analyze the role of these European companies and the interest of the EU and its member states in the green extractivism of the territory, in 23 we published a report, The Legitimation of the Occupation of Western Sahara in Times of Energy Crisis. This report shows how Morocco's own political interest and the EU interest in the energy transition and the carbonization of the European economy feed off each other, turning Western Sahara into a sacrifice zone. The Sahrawi people and their rights are an element that can be left behind in order to guarantee European countries a cheap access to renewable energy. Morocco, for its part, is using this energy interest to deepen the occupation of Sahrawi territory. Finally, I would like to mention an issue that it is essential also for understanding the dimension of the problem and also the impact of this green neocolonialism on the Sahrawi people. While investment by Moroccan, European and international companies in occupied Western Sahara are increasing under the guise of promoting a green economy and ecological transition practices, the Sahrawi refugee population, deprived of the fundamental right to benefit from the exploitation of its resources, is facing a situation of serious humanitarian crisis. The latest research carried out by our NGO in 2024 shows how the Sahrawi refugee population lacks access to a fundamental right such as the right to food. While European actors are increasing their investments in the territory of Western Sahara, the progressive reduction of food aid to the Sahrawi refugee camps is becoming more and more acute. The reduction in aid affects not only to the availability of and the access to food in sufficient quantity and quality, but also the adequacy and stability of such access. For example, half of the monthly food distribution in the camps in recent years have failed to meet the minimum reference standards of 2,500 kilocalories a day. And food programs are subject to multiple fluctuations in both quantity and variety of items. Approximately, at best, each person received less than 350 grams of food per day in 2022. And if we look at fresh produce alone, that would be just 40 grams per person per day. This reduction in aid, combined with global international inflationary trends, is directly linked to data showing a doubling of acute malnutrition and anemia, and an increase of more than 50% in chronic malnutrition in children under 5 in the last 5 years only. These reports, to sum up, these reports show us that the exploitation of Western Sahara natural resources, as in other contexts of occupation and neocolonial dependency, Manuel was comparing also with Palestine, far from contributing to the improving of Sahrawi people's standard of living or to the global effort to combat climate crisis, has become a strategy to keep Sahrawi territory under occupation and the Sahrawi people either subjected to a regime of oppression or condemned to an exile that lasts for 50 years. Thank you very much.